Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I will be using Aqua Cast water-based eco resin to create a beautiful Christmassy candle jar with my new mould from Nicole. You will also see me painting the jar and pouring the candle. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Before I started filming, I had already worked out the volume of my two moulds by filling them with water and weighing them at the same time, and using that weight in the Aqua Cast calculator on the Elichem website to find out exactly how much water and powder I would need. Once I had that information, I was ready to start measuring out my Aqua Cast and water. I measured out 160 grams of water and 444 grams of Aqua Cast powder. So once they were measured out, it was time to give it a good mix up. Now, I've kept it in real time. I usually would speed it up, but I wanted you to see how quickly it actually mixes. It's very, very quick because you're mixing with water and it's nice and thin. Whereas, if you were mixing something like Jesmonite or Hydroflow or one that comes with the liquid as well, the liquid is thicker and it does take a lot longer to mix. But when you're mixing with water, it's very quick. The ingredients of the Aqua Cast powder are actually very similar to what you get when you get the two-part eco resins where you get the liquid with them. But instead of having the important stuff in the liquid, it's been fused into the powder. And so, you're not losing anything by mixing it with water. It's just the same stuff, really. I'm sure it's not exactly the same. There'll be some differences. But you just have to buy the powder, which is great. So there it is, all mixed up. Wasn't that easy? I'm not adding any pigment today. I wanted to keep it white because I'm going to be doing some painting, and I thought the nice crisp whiteness would look nice against the painted details. So this mould that I'm using today is from Nicole. It's from their new Christmas collection and I love it. It's so nice. And it comes with the mould housing to help it to keep its shape, and you'll see that soon. But for now, I wanted to keep it off so I could give it a good squeeze around the bottom to make sure that there was no air pockets in there. And I'm also trying to make sure all the sides are kind of covered as well. It kind of primes the mould and helps it to not get air bubbles trapped on the side of the silicone. So once I'd put that small amount of Aqua Cast in, I added the mould housing. Now what I used to do was fill up the mould and give it a good squeeze and a tap and a wobble around before adding the mould housing. But what I found was that sometimes when you do that, adding the mould housing kind of causes lines in the finished piece. I don't know exactly why that happens, but I did find that if you add the mould housing before adding your Aqua Cast, you get a much better finish. So that's why I added it then. And there I'm just pouring in the rest. And once that's all poured in, I'll give it a good tap and a bash around to help all the air bubbles to come to the top. Now, because of the shape of it, it's a very round mould. There's no getting away from it. Some air bubbles will get trapped on the upper curve where they just can't get past that curve and come out to the top. I have never found a way to completely eliminate those on curved moulds. I'm sure there's a way. I do quite fancy treating myself to one of those vibrating machines to see if that helps, but so far, I haven't done it. They're quite expensive, but maybe Santa might bring me one, eh? So once the jar mould was filled with Aqua Cast, it was time to fill the lid. Now the lid, I don't know if you can see. Oh, it's gone now. You definitely won't be able to see. But the handle on the top of the lid is kind of like a ring with a hole in the middle. And so the mould has got like a split in it, and Well, you'll see. You'll see. I can't describe it. When I demold it, you'll see what I mean. But yeah, it's quite a good lid. I really like the way that the handle is in a loop shape. It's really nice. But yeah, I'm just doing the same thing again. Just rolling the Aqua Cast around the edges, making sure that the silicone is primed and coated before filling it up completely and giving it a really good squeeze on the bottom. And then once I filled it up, I used a micro brush and I kept running it along the inside of that rim of the mould, because that's where you do get the air bubbles coming up and they all join together and form one big pocket of air. And luckily you can see that through the mould. It's kind of semi-opaque and you can see through it just about enough to see air pockets in there. In fact, you can probably see one right now. And so yeah, I go round with my micro brush every now and again. I babysit it for a while because they do keep appearing, and if you can kind of tease out those air pockets, it will stop you from getting lots and lots of holes on the underside of your lid. Okay, after about an hour, it was time to take them out of their moulds. And I've got to say, I get quite excited when it's a brand new mould because I wasn't quite sure how it was going to look until it came out. So yeah, I couldn't wait to have a look. These moulds from Boo and Nicole are very soft and pliable, as you can probably tell, and they come off very easily. Don't know if you can see on your screens, but there's quite a few little air bubbles that I just couldn't get rid of, and that's what I was talking about before, and it's usually along the underside of the finished jar, so luckily you can't really see them, but the top part was beautiful and smooth, as you can see here. Isn't that lovely? I really love those holly leaves and the berries. It's just so pretty. Right, let's have a look at the lid. Right, here's where you get to see what I couldn't explain before. On the silicone mould, in the handle area, I just pulled it apart a little bit because that's where the split in the mould is, so that you can get the handle out. And there you can see the Aqua Cast has gone in between the split, but that's okay because in a moment you'll see how easily it is to get rid of that. But yeah, isn't that gorgeous? I love the lid. Couldn't wait to start painting it. So yeah, let me show you what I did just to get rid of that thin layer. Are you ready for it? Blink and you'll miss it. I was actually just wondering what to use to get rid of it, and I pressed it with my finger and out it popped, and then I just got rid of any little bits that were still sticking out and it was fine. There we go. That little layer doesn't cause any problems. You just push it out with your finger. Right, it was ready for painting. So when I'm painting Aqua Cast, I like to use acrylic paints. I don't seal the Aqua Cast first. I find that it works better if you don't seal it first. So here I've got the light green that I'm going to be using, and I do use a darker green acrylic paint as well. I wanted the middles of my leaves to be the lighter green with the dark on the edges. So first of all, I filled in all the middles of my leaves with the light green. Once all the middles were painted, I took my darker green acrylic paint and brushed from the outside of the leaf inwards in like a flicking motion, and then it blended in quite nicely, and I really liked the finished effect I got painting in this way. And if you get any paint where you don't want the paint to be, don't worry, don't go trying to wipe it off with something damp, because that will just make the pigment go further into the Aqua Cast. Let it dry and just use a craft knife very gently to just scrape it off. And that seems to work better, in my opinion. You might find a different way, to clean up any mistakes, but that worked quite well for me. So while that paint was drying, I started on the jar, and I did very much the same thing again. It was exactly the same colours and the same technique. I wanted the lid and the jar to, blend together nicely without adding different colours and different techniques. So yeah, they complement each other well. I spent quite a long time doing that, and you can probably tell by the lighting that I'm now working under artificial light because it was later on in the day. And next it was time to fill in the berries, which was the bit I was really looking forward to. I felt like those berries really did transform it and really bring it to life. The colours, the red, the green and the white are just so Christmassy, and I think it all looks very crisp. Now obviously this process is not for everyone. If you make your items to sell, you probably wouldn't make much profit when thinking about, the time that you're spending on it. But I'm not making this to sell. I'm making it just for the joy of it. And that's why I didn't mind spending a long time on it. When all that was finished, I decided I also wanted to paint the decorative edging around the edge of the lid. There's also the same pattern on the jar, which I did off camera, and you'll see that soon. I wanted it to be red and gold, and I decided the easiest way to do it was, instead of trying to be really careful and just filling in that middle band, I painted it all red. So the bits that are going to be gold were painted red. And so, yeah, all of it was red, and I just went over the top with the gold. And actually that worked well. It saved me a lot of time, but the red colour is also a good base colour for the gold. And speaking of gold, here it is. I've got my chrome marker from Let's Resin, and this is the fine point chrome marker, which I find a lot easier to use if it's like a detailed piece like this. And yeah, I just painted with it all the bits that I wanted to be gold, and it worked really, really well. And here it is, all finished. Doesn't that look pretty? Yeah, I was very, very happy with it. So once all the painting was done, then it was time to seal it. And I'm using sealing wax. It's the Clark's sealing wax for stone and concrete. And I used a microfiber cloth and rubbed wax all over, including the inside. I'm going to be adding candle wax into my jar, and you'll see that in a moment. So yeah, when you're adding candle wax, particularly if you're using fragrance or colour in your wax, you need to seal the inside of your jar, because otherwise the fragrance or colour can seep into the Aqua Cast. So the sealing wax works really well to seal the inside of your jar. Right, let's pour the candle. I'm using my wick placement disc from Boo and Nicole here. It's magnetic, and the wick in its stand just clips onto it, even through that thick layer of Aqua Cast. The magnet's very strong. And with the guidelines, you can make sure you get your jar central before adding your wick. I actually have 2 wooden wicks in that stand because I find it works better with larger candles. I'm using the Christmas morning fragrance from Simply Scented, and I've measured it out. It's 10% of the volume of the wax. I've melted the wax already in my new wax melting machine, which I love. It's not sponsored, I just bought it for myself, but I love this. It's so handy. I don't need to use my hob in the kitchen anymore. I can just do it in my craft room. And so yeah, I'm just mixing in the fragrance before pouring the wax. The wax is 50% soy and 50% beeswax. So you need to leave about 4 or 5 millimeters of the wick at the top. You don't need to leave a lot, but I needed to bear in mind that I needed space for the bottom side of the lid to fit into there as well. So I had that in mind when I was pouring the wax, and I didn't go too deep. I gave the wax and the jar a couple of days to fully cure before lighting it. And here I am just very awkwardly clipping the wick in front of the camera. It's always difficult when you've got a camera between you and whatever you're doing. But there we go. It's clipped, and it's about 4 millimeters in length. And let's get it lit. Okay, so I did mention before that I used 2 wicks in this, and the flame at first will seem really large. Don't worry, that does calm down after a while. But yeah, it looks quite ferocious there, doesn't it? But I do really find that having 2 wicks helps you to get a much longer life out of your candle. You get a bigger melt pool and less tunnelling going on there. So yeah, I have had much more success by doubling up with the wick. And yeah, I think that looks lovely. I think the wooden wicks are great and they give you a lovely crackling noise as well. Well, we've come to the end of another video and I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you're interested in any of the products that I've used today, please find the links and discount codes in my video description. If you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to. And I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching and bye for now.